Hello everybody, and today we are going to talk about data conversion. Now sometimes you might hear me say data conversion. Either way, it's the same thing whether you say data or you say data. And specifically, we're talking about SPSS and the data conversion. So the native file for SPSS is a .save file or a .sav file. That would be the same thing as saying a native file for a Microsoft Office Word would be a .doc or a .docx file. The same way, we want a .save file for our SPSS statistics. Now I'm actually showing you and demonstrating on an Apple Mac, but it works the same way in a Windows environment. And as you've noticed from the amount of time that I'm talking here, it takes a little while to open, and that's normal. This particular version is version 22, but it's very similar to what you would see in a version 23 or 24. Please do keep in mind that before we work with a data conversion, we need to ensure that our SPSS software is fully functional. In other words, you should be able to open it like I've done here. Even if it's a different version, this is what the Apple version 22 looks like. Yours might look a little bit different, have different modules here, but basically the same setup. You've got the name of the software, new files, recent files, and so forth. Now in this case, we're actually going to choose Open Another File because our goal here is to open what's called a .dat file. Now a .dat file is a data file in the format of .dat, which is normally a tab delimited file. What we want to do is open it and convert it to a .save or .sav file, which will be a native IBM SPSS statistics file. Now, if you find yourself not able to open IBM SPSS, not able to find it, well, and by the way, when it comes to finding the file, please ensure that you're opening the application file. If you're using Windows, it's under Programs or Program Files. If you're using an Apple Macintosh, it is under Applications. Sometimes people double-click the installation file or one of the files that they have downloaded, and it seems as if the process that they went through is repeating itself. Well, that's only because you're not opening the application or the program. So we definitely want to open the file. In Windows, it's in the Programs, and on Apple, that's in the Applications. And also, let's take a quick look at this screen. This particular screen shows after a Windows installation, and there's a button, and it says to click here to authorize the software. Most software, I cannot think of an exception at the time, even with free software, there's a registration or an authorization process. However, most of the time, it's kind of built into the installation, and so it's not hard to find because you're just led to that spot. However, I'm going to show you another image. So you have two images, and especially on the Windows side, because there's a separate program or a separate application that you need to go through to ensure that you have authorized the IBM SPSS statistics. And that's all a part of making sure that our IBM SPSS statistics is fully functional before we do our data conversion. So let's assume that we've gone through that process, we're fully functional, which is my case here, and we are ready to go for the conversion. I'm going to click on Open Another File and click OK. And I'm going to select it. It's actually in my downloads, and I made a special file called data. And this particular DSUS4 data, that's actually from Andy Field. Andy Field is one of my favorite authors. And in fact, I'll show you a quick picture of his book there and provide you with a link that goes along with this video. He is wonderful when it comes to statistics and also with working with SPSS. It makes sense because that's part of the title of his book, as you can see. So anyway, this data came from him, allowed to use it, and I'm going to double click on the folder. Now, right away here, I want to look at the file type. Now remember I told you I was converting a .dat file to a .save. Now you can see here, SPSS statistics files. There we go. And beyond the .save, you have the .zsave, .sps. You have all different types here, file types that are native to SPSS. The main one that we're working with is the .save data file format. But remember I mentioned that we're converting a .dat? In this case, we need to change what we're looking for to this one right here. Do you see where it says text data? And there's a .txt file type, there's a .dat, remember that's what we're looking for, .csv, oftentimes you see that when you're doing conversions with Excel, and a .tab, which stands for the tab delimited, the same thing as what the .dat was as we described it earlier. So this is the type we're looking for. Now watch what happens. And I happen to know this because I put this .dat file in here. I actually took one of Andy Field, one of his .save files, and I converted it to a .dat so that we could go the other direction, and I could demonstrate that. So we know that this is a .dat file. We're going to open that. And notice here, text import wizard, step 1 of 6. So usually on this screen here, there isn't anything special that we need to do. There are things available, but for the purposes of a simplified data conversion, there's nothing that we have to change. Now, if you see right here on this line that I'm pointing to, there's actually field names, like the type of variable. I just wanted you to make note of that. And there's a reason why there's this other thing going on here that ends in a 2. That will be explained in a moment, because I want you to understand how to do kind of error correction as we're going in case you see it in your situation. So we're done with step 1. Didn't really have to do anything on step 1 of 6. We're going to click on continue. Step 2 of 6. We already mentioned it's delimited, it's tab delimited versus fixed width. Fixed width would be it's a certain width, but we don't need to worry about that. It is tab delimited. And that's our default with SPSS. Now, the question here is, are variable names included at the top of your file? As a matter of fact, they are. And we looked at it on the previous screen. Do you see here? It's the same thing we saw on the previous screen, the previous step. There's actual field names. So the answer to this question, are variable names included at the top of your file? The answer would be yes. We're going to click yes and watch what happens to those variable names. They go away. That's because what we're telling SPSS is, hey, we don't want that particular row because it's not really a case, it's not really a row, it's simply variable names. So step 2 of 6, the only change we made from the default was that we clicked yes, that there are variable names at the top of the file. And again, I'm going to click no so you can see them. They're right there. We click yes to tell SPSS that we don't want to import that. And there we go. We're importing the data. And we're importing the variable names as variable names, but not as actual data input. Let's go ahead and click continue to go on to step 3. Just like we were talking about in the previous step, each line represents a case, also referred to as a row. And in this case, we want to import all of the cases, or all of the rows, all of the lines, whichever word you want to use. At the very top, it says the first case of data begins on which line number. Now it's line 2. The reason it's line 2 is because line 1 was those variable names. So SPSS already knows that. In this particular case, we haven't had to make any changes on our step 3 of 6 in our data conversion process. Let's go ahead and go to step 4. Now, in step 4, the default may vary from software to software. Many times the default indicates that it's tab delimited and space delimited. Now let's see if we have anything at all. I don't think we do in this data set, but I'm just going to look and see if we have anything. Oh, we do, as a matter of fact. Here, it pushes out. And what happens is if there's a space that's separating between the 6 and the 0, and we're using space as a delimiter, it's going to push it out to another column, and that is going to be incorrect information. So we definitely don't want that to happen. So in this case, we happen to know that the data is only delimited by a tab. So we want to uncheck space and only select tab. And we do not have any other kind of text qualifier. So we're all set on step 4 of 6. As you can see, we are all set here. And there are no outliers, there's no data errors now that we've removed the space. So let's go ahead and move on to step 5. And in this section, this is a very handy section. We could actually go through each of these variables. If you notice, as I click on each column, the variable name changes. And this is where we could change the data format. This is very handy as we're doing a conversion, or you can also do it after the fact. So whether you do it here and actually change it to a numeric data format, string, date and time, and there's some other options, or you do it after the fact within the variable view. It's up to you. For these purposes, we're just looking at the actual data conversion and not spending a lot of time on this particular step. So we're going to click continue and go on to step 6 of 6. If you're familiar with pasting the syntax, that's when we're able to paste what we just did, like writing a program, so that we're able to repeat this. The file format, this is kind of another item that's related to syntax. Syntax is the programming. File format is like saving this as a template. For these purposes, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to click Done. And as we do that, a couple different things happen. We get something that's called Untitled 2, and that's our data. This is our data view, where we get to see all of the data, as well as the variable names at the top. See, we did import the variable names, but we imported them as variable names rather than an actual data row. That would have been incorrect. Now, we can also look at the variable view, and we can see more information. And this is where if we needed to change something like the type of a particular variable, we can also do it under the variable view. And that's what I wanted to show you so that you could see that there's two different ways. Also, there's something called coding, and this is value labels, and that's something for another discussion, but I wanted to show it to you so that you understood what value labels, what labeling and coding of a database has to do with. And scales of measurement, also referred to as levels of measurement. Now please keep in mind, just a little note while we're here, there's actually 4 scales of measurement, but SPSS likes to group the ordinal, I'm sorry, not the ordinal, we have ordinal here, we have nominal here. SPSS likes to group together the interval and the ratio under scale. But scale is not a scale of measurement, or also called level of measurement. Scale is not a measurement in that particular grouping. but it is used to represent two different types of measurements within this particular software. So just wanted to be sure that you were not confused by that. At this point, we are able to save our file. We can click on Save As. We could also click Save. We can go to our data location where we want to save it. Now, if you are doing this as an assignment for a particular class, then possibly you want to save it with the class information and assignment information. That may be an easy place to find it later. In this case, I actually have a data folder, which is the same place where I put Andy Field's data. And by the way, his name is Andy Field. I say Andy Fields because it was the possessive version. So I could just call this example data, and I want to save it as type.sav, type save. I'm not going to put a password on it. I'm just going to hit save. Okay, well, thanks all for joining us, and we will catch you on the next how-to with the tips and strategies for love for statistics. This is Deborah signing off.